Viktor Bout, famously known as the Merchant of Death,
Why do the Americans want you so badly?
Go and ask them. Go and ask Bush administration, Obama administration. Go and ask Mrs. Clinton. She could have explained why they did it. I don't know. I have no clue.
Viktor Bout appeared to be a businessman, but was, in reality, a global arms dealer responsible for fueling some of the world's deadliest conflicts. Born in the former Soviet Union, Bout was fluent in several languages, including English, French, Portuguese, Arabic, and Persian, and served as a military translator before turning to the black market. When the Soviet Union collapsed, vast stockpiles of military weapons were left unsecured. Bout saw this as an opportunity and launched one of the largest illicit arms networks in modern history. Bout's operation was vast, using Soviet cargo planes to transport weapons to war-torn regions across the world. His clientele included warlords, rebel groups, and corrupt governments. Whether they needed rifles or anti-aircraft missiles, Bout delivered, no questions asked. One of his most notorious clients was Liberia's Charles Taylor, who used Bout's shipments to arm forces responsible for horrific atrocities. His role in exacerbating civil wars in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East earned him the moniker Merchant of Death. Bout was elusive, slipping through the fingers of law enforcement by hiding his operations behind legitimate businesses and fake identities. However, his luck ran out in 2008 when U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration agents, posing as Colombian rebels, lured him to Thailand with the promise of a large arms deal. After his arrest, Russia opposed his extradition to the U.S., but Bout was eventually convicted on terrorism-related charges and sentenced to 25 years in prison. In 2022, Bout was returned to Russia in a prisoner swap for American basketball player Brittany Griner, ending his time in U.S. custody. Charles Ng, alongside his partner Leonard Lake, formed one of the most sadistic criminal alliances in U.S. history. Ng and Lake shared dark fantasies of controlling, torturing, and killing others. Together, they constructed a fortified bunker on Lake's California property, equipped with soundproof walls, hidden rooms, and restraining devices designed specifically for imprisoning their victims. Their spree of kidnapping, torture, and murder began in the 1980s. They often targeted young women, but didn't limit themselves to any specific demographic. In several cases, they killed entire families, abducting children to fulfill their twisted desires. Ng and Lake even filmed parts of their sadistic acts, forcing their victims to endure unimaginable suffering while capturing their terror on tape. Their reign of terror came to an end in 1985, when Ng was caught shoplifting a vise from a hardware store, which led authorities to discover their bunker and the gruesome evidence inside. Lake was apprehended, but committed suicide by ingesting cyanide before facing trial. Ng, however, managed to escape to Canada, sparking an international manhunt that lasted 6 years. Ng's capture was only the beginning of a long legal battle, as he fought extradition to the U.S. from Canada. When he was finally returned to California, his trial became one of the most expensive and protracted in U.S. history. Ng was convicted of 11 murders, though investigators believe the actual number of his victims could be far higher. His cold cruelty and the horrific nature of his crimes left an indelible mark on criminal history. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán is perhaps the most notorious drug lord in modern history. The leader of the Sinaloa cartel, Guzmán built a sprawling empire that controlled a vast portion of the global drug trade. His rise to power began in the rugged mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico, where he grew up in poverty. From his humble beginnings, Guzmán transformed himself into one of the world's most powerful criminals. The Sinaloa cartel's operations extended far beyond Mexico, controlling major drug trafficking routes into the United States, Europe, and beyond. Guzmán's cartel was responsible for smuggling vast quantities of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana across borders, making him billions of dollars. He ruled his empire with a mixture of ruthless violence and strategic generosity. In the impoverished regions of Mexico, he was seen as a Robin Hood-like figure, helping local communities with his wealth. However, he brutally eliminated anyone who posed a threat to his dominance. El Chapo became infamous not only for his wealth and power, but also for his incredible ability to escape from high-security prisons. His first escape in 2001 was straight out of a Hollywood movie. He bribed nearly everyone in his path and simply walked out of a high-security prison hidden in a laundry cart. After being recaptured in 2014, Guzmán executed an even more daring escape, this time through an elaborate tunnel that stretched a mile long, emerging directly under his prison shower. The tunnel was complete with ventilation, lights, and even a motorcycle on rails. In 2016, after years of evading law enforcement, Guzmán was finally captured by Mexican authorities and extradited to the US. His trial was widely publicized, and he was sentenced to life in prison in 2019. James Whitey Bulger was one of Boston's most notorious mob bosses, ruling the city's criminal underworld with an iron fist. As the leader of the Winter Hill Gang, Bulger was involved in everything from drug trafficking to extortion and loan sharking. His violent reign left a trail of death and destruction, and he was feared by both enemies and associates alike. What made Bulger's story even more chilling was his double life as an informant for the FBI. For years, Bulger used his status as an informant to eliminate rivals in the Italian mafia while avoiding prosecution himself. His corrupt relationship with the FBI allowed him to expand his criminal empire with near impunity, all while feeding the FBI information on his competitors. Bulger's reign came to an end in 1995 when he vanished just before federal authorities were set to arrest him. For 16 years, Bulger remained one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives, evading capture despite an international manhunt. He was finally arrested in 2011 in Santa Monica, California, where he had been living under the alias Charlie Gasco. Bulger's trial exposed the deep corruption within the FBI, as agents had protected him in exchange for information. In 2018, Bulger was brutally murdered in a West Virginia prison, putting an end to one of America's most infamous criminal careers.
Bulger's killers were seen on surveillance tape entering his cell around 6 a.m., moments after the cell was unlocked for breakfast. The killers reportedly tried to cut out his tongue and gouge out his eyes. Traditional payback for an informant.
Semion Mogilevich, often referred to as the Brainy Don, is a unique figure in the world of organized crime. Unlike traditional mobsters who relied on violence, Mogilevich built his empire through cunning and sophisticated financial crimes. Born in Ukraine, he rose to prominence in the Russian mob, orchestrating complex schemes that spanned across continents. Mogilevich's criminal empire revolved around money laundering, securities fraud, and smuggling. He masterminded one of the largest financial frauds in history when his sham corporation, YBM Magnex, defrauded millions of American investors of over $150 million. Despite law enforcement efforts to track him down, Mogilevich has remained elusive, moving between countries and using high-profile connections to evade capture. His ties to Russian intelligence have made him nearly untouchable, and he is rumored to have deep connections within the Kremlin. Though the FBI has pursued him for decades, Mogilevich continues to be a shadowy figure in the world of organized crime. His current location unknown, Ayman al-Zawahiri was one of the most influential figures in global terrorism, second only to Osama bin Laden. Born into a respected Egyptian family, al-Zawahiri trained as a surgeon before turning to radical Islamic extremism. He played a pivotal role in shaping al-Qaeda into a global terrorist network capable of carrying out devastating attacks. Al-Zawahiri's hatred for the West solidified after being imprisoned and tortured in Egypt. When he joined forces with bin Laden, the two became the architects of international terror, orchestrating attacks that shook the world. Al-Zawahiri was instrumental in planning the 9/11 attacks, which left nearly 3,000 dead and changed the course of history. After bin Laden's death in 2011, al-Zawahiri took over leadership of al-Qaeda, continuing to inspire and direct terrorist activities across the globe. Despite intense efforts by Western intelligence agencies to capture or kill him, al-Zawahiri remained at large for over 2 decades. In 2022, a CIA drone strike in Kabul, Afghanistan, finally ended al-Zawahiri's life, marking the end of one of the most infamous terror leaders in modern history. Ted Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber, was one of the most notorious domestic terrorists in U.S. history. A former mathematics prodigy, Kaczynski became disillusioned with modern society and technology, which he believed were destroying human freedom. In 1971, he retreated to a remote cabin in Montana, where he lived off the grid and developed his anti-technology, anti-industrial philosophy. Kaczynski's bombing campaign began in 1978 and lasted until 1995. Over these years, he sent homemade bombs to universities, airlines, and individuals involved in promoting modern technology. His devices killed 3 people and injured dozens, instilling fear across the country. Despite an extensive FBI manhunt, Kaczynski remained at large for nearly 2 decades. His downfall came when he sent his manifesto to several newspapers, demanding its publication. Recognizing the language and ideas in the manifesto, Kaczynski's brother came forward, providing the FBI with the lead that led to his capture in 1996.
The story at least helps me to believe that maybe some good can come out of this, that if kids can think about the ethical dilemma that our family faced.
Kaczynski was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and his case remains a stark reminder of the dangers of domestic terrorism. Adolf Eichmann, often referred to as the architect of the Holocaust, was a high-ranking Nazi officer responsible for organizing the mass deportation of Jews to concentration camps. Eichmann played a crucial role in implementing the final solution, meticulously designing transport schedules to ensure the efficient extermination of millions of Jews. His cold, bureaucratic approach allowed him to distance himself from the horrors he oversaw, viewing his actions as simply fulfilling his duties. After World War II, Eichmann escaped capture and fled to Argentina, where he lived under the alias Ricardo Clement. For years, he lived a quiet life in Buenos Aires, working at a Mercedes-Benz plant and blending into the expatriate community. However, his past eventually caught up with him when Israeli intelligence agency Mossad tracked him down in 1960. In a covert operation, Eichmann was captured and smuggled to Israel, where he stood trial for his role in the Holocaust. Eichmann's 1961 trial became one of the first public reckonings with the atrocities of the Holocaust, as survivors testified to the horrors they endured. Eichmann was found guilty and executed in 1962, bringing closure to one of history's most notorious war criminals. Osama bin Laden is perhaps the most infamous terrorist in modern history, known for orchestrating the 9/11 attacks. Born into a wealthy Saudi family, bin Laden initially supported the Afghan Mujahideen in their fight against Soviet forces. Over time, his ideology became increasingly radical, and he founded al-Qaeda, a militant group dedicated to fighting Western influence in the Middle East. Under bin Laden's leadership, al-Qaeda carried out numerous attacks, including the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, which killed hundreds. However, it was the September 11, 2001 attacks that solidified bin Laden's place in history. Al-Qaeda operatives hijacked 4 planes, crashing 2 into the World Trade Center towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and another into a field in Pennsylvania. The attacks killed nearly 3,000 people and triggered the US-led war on terror. For nearly a decade, bin Laden evaded capture, moving between hidden compounds in Pakistan and Afghanistan. In 2011, after years of intense tracking, US Navy SEALs raided his compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, killing bin Laden and ending one of the most extensive manhunts in history. Pablo Escobar, the notorious Colombian drug lord, built the Medellin cartel into one of the most powerful criminal organizations in history. Escobar's cartel controlled 80% of the global cocaine market at its peak, generating billions of dollars and turning him into one of the richest men in the world. His wealth and power allowed him to operate with impunity for many years, and he was seen by many as a Robin Hood-like figure for his charitable acts in Colombia. However, behind his public persona was a ruthless criminal responsible for countless murders, bombings, and kidnappings. Escobar used extreme violence to maintain control of the drug trade, and his cartel's reign of terror left thousands dead. After years of evading authorities, Escobar was killed in a dramatic rooftop shootout with Colombian forces in 1993.